GTA has given us soldiers, gangsters, and career criminals with full backstories, voiced by Hollywood actors, dripping with personality. But the character who started the whole modern era of the franchise, nobody can tell you a single thing about him. Today, we're breaking down every main GTA protagonist, who they are, what drives them, and why they matter. Starting with the one who is somehow both the foundation of everything and a complete mystery: Claude. Claude is the protagonist of GTA 3, released in 2001, and the character who basically invented what a modern GTA game looks like. Third-person open world, cinematic storytelling, a protagonist with actual motivations. He built the template every character after him would follow. He also never says a single word, no voice lines, no dialogue, nothing. People talk at him constantly and he just stands there, processing, plotting. The only completely silent main protagonist in the franchise's history. That silence was intentional. Blank slate design, no backstory, no defined personality, no opinions. Players project themselves onto Claude because there's nothing else there. His entire setup is that his girlfriend shoots him and leaves him for dead in the opening minutes. Betrayal, survival, revenge. Beyond that, Claude is whoever you decide he is, the most debated nobody in gaming history, and at least he got to be anonymous. Tommy Vercetti had no such luck, because everybody in Liberty City had an opinion about him, and most of those opinions involved wanting him dead. Tommy Vercetti, after an entire game of controlling a guy who communicated exclusively through car theft and murder, Tommy Vercetti shows up in Vice City and will not stop talking. And honestly, thank God. Released in October 2002, Vice City dropped players into a neon-soaked 1980s Miami fantasy with Ray Liotta voicing the lead. That's the detail that matters here. Ray Liotta, an actual Hollywood actor with genuine screen presence, bringing a fully realized, loud, manipulative, and magnetic crime boss to life in what was still a relatively young franchise. The tonal whiplash from Claude is immediate and total. Tommy himself spent 15 years in prison before the game even starts, entering the story at 40 years old, older and angrier than any GTA protagonist before him, and he makes up for lost time fast. By the end of the game, he's sitting on an empire built through drug trafficking, real estate, and just an extraordinary amount of personal violence across a city he essentially willed into submission. He still controls it years later, even getting a name drop in San Andreas to confirm he never lost his grip on Vice City. Here's the thing about Tommy's legacy. Fans still argue about whether he or Niko Bellic is the better GTA protagonist, and that debate has never really settled. Tommy's cartoonish charisma versus Niko's moral weight. It's apples and oranges, but people will die on both hills. CJ arrived next and brought an entirely different kind of ambition with him. CJ Carl Johnson is probably the most beloved protagonist in GTA history, and if you disagree, Grove Street would like a word with you. San Andreas dropped in October 2004, and it hit differently from anything before it. CJ comes home to Los Santos after his mother is murdered, gets immediately shaken down by corrupt cops, and gets dragged back into the gang life he spent years trying to leave behind. That's a real emotional hook. Not "I got betrayed during a drug deal. His mom died and nobody cared enough to call him." That Land's young Melee's voice performance is a huge part of why CJ works. There's a cultural authenticity to it that the series had never had before, and the world reflected that with dedicated rap and hip-hop stations and a respect mechanic tied directly to how deep you ran with your set. The world itself was massive, the largest in the franchise at launch, and CJ could actually navigate it properly. He could swim, he could climb, he could move like a person. Claude literally could not swim. You'd brush a puddle wrong and that man would dissolve. But here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. CJ's arc eventually turns him into a government asset, manipulated by corrupt agents into working against his own community. He never gets clean hands. The corruption just changes shape around him. 20 years later, people are still debating whether San Andreas celebrated its culture or leaned too hard on the stereotypes surrounding it. Probably both, honestly. Tony Cipriani is next, and his story goes in a very different direction. Tony Cipriani. Tony Cipriani is genuinely one of the most interesting GTA protagonists, and the fact that most people have never heard of him is entirely a hardware problem. He's the lead of GTA Liberty City Stories, released in October 2005, voiced by Danny Mastrogiorgio, and built around a premise almost no other GTA game bothers with. Tony isn't a freelance criminal working his way up from nothing. He's a made man in the Italian mafia, operating inside a structured criminal hierarchy as a soldier, not an independent operator. He returns to Liberty City after a 4-year exile and immediately slots back into the chain of command like he never left. That's a genuinely different angle for this franchise, and it makes him stand out from basically everyone else on this list. Here's the thing though, barely anyone played it because it launched as a PSP exclusive. The game released on a handheld in 2005 with a PS2 port following about 8 months later in 2006. Story set in 1998, acting as a prequel to GTA 3, filling in Liberty City's history before the events most people actually remember. Solid character work, unique premise. Didn't matter. The handheld launch meant a massive chunk of the GTA audience simply never engaged. Some fans argue Tony's setup, the returning outsider reintegrating into a criminal world that moved on without him, got recycled and expanded into Niko Bellic's entire arc a few years later. Niko got the PS3 budget. Tony got a UMD cartridge. He deserved better. Moving on, Victor Vance has a similar problem, except his story comes with a twist you already know the ending to before you even press start. Victor Vance. Victor Vance is one of the only GTA protagonists you meet already knowing exactly how his story ends, and it ends badly. Released in 2006 on PSP, Vice City Stories is a direct prequel to Vice City, which means the moment you boot it up, you're playing a dead man's origin story. Victor gets gunned down in the opening minutes of Vice City. That's not a spoiler, it's a fixture. It's sitting there the entire time you're building his empire, watching him fight to hold everything together. You already know none of it survives. Tommy Vercetti dismantles every last piece of it 2 years later. Here's the thing, that's a genuinely fascinating narrative structure that almost nobody talks about. Foreknowledge of a protagonist's death doesn't usually make a story more engaging, it makes it feel pointless. But Victor's story argues the opposite. The tragedy isn't the death, it's the gap, but the platform limited the audience, which limited the cultural conversation, which is why he's perpetually underrepresented despite having real franchise level potential. If Victor represents a tragedy you watch coming from miles away, Niko Bellic is something different entirely. A man trying to outrun his own past and nearly making it. Niko Bellic. Niko Bellic is the best protagonist in GTA history, and if you disagree, I genuinely want to hear your argument because nobody has made a convincing one yet. GTA 4 dropped in April 2008 and Niko arrived with it, an Eastern European war veteran climbing off a boat in Liberty City with a cousin's promises ringing in his ears and absolutely zero reason to trust any of them. He's chasing the American dream, which is already a franchise tradition. But here's the thing, Niko is the only protagonist who knows from the very first cutscene that the dream is probably a lie. Every other character is running towards something. Niko is running away from something and he's not even sure he can outrun it. That's the entire game, mechanically and emotionally. Two endings, two versions of the same thesis. One where he scrapes together a fragile, blood-stained peace. One where personal tragedy drags him permanently back into the violence he spent the whole game trying to leave behind. Neither ending is triumphant. Both are honest. That's not a GTA game, that's a novel. Michael Hollick's performance carries genuine weight throughout, and the immigrant experience angle landed differently than anything the franchise had attempted before, sparking real conversations about representation, trauma, and whether war-damaged immigrant is a character or just a costume. And then there's the Tommy debate. Tommy has the charisma, the jacket, the Ray Liotta voice, the whole 80s package. Niko has the depth. Fans have been arguing about this since 2008, and both sides are still fighting because neither side is entirely wrong. That argument never quite gets settled, unlike Johnny Klebitz, whose story gets settled for him in the most permanent way possible. Johnny Klebitz. Johnny Klebitz is the only GTA protagonist whose story ends with another protagonist's boot on his skull. That's not a metaphor. That's literally what happens. Johnny leads the Lost Motorcycle Club through GTA, The Lost and Damned, a 2009 DLC expansion built around institutional betrayal. He holds the club together while everyone above him uses him as a stepping stone. His arc covers loyalty, leadership, and what happens when the institution you've dedicated your life to doesn't deserve it. For a DLC protagonist, that's a genuinely full, serious story. Here's the thing though, most casual GTA fans never played it. DLC creates a weird blind spot where the character exists in the canon, but not in most players' actual memory, which is exactly what makes his GTA 5 appearance so brutal. Early in GTA 5, before you've even settled into the game, Johnny shows up strung out and barely recognizable, and Trevor Phillips, in a scene that takes about 30 seconds, kills him. A protagonist from a previous game, gone, treated like a side note in someone else's story. Fans have argued about it ever since. Half the community calls it a bold narrative statement, proof that the GTA universe has real weight. The other half argues Johnny deserved better than being used as a prop to establish how unhinged Trevor is. Both are probably right, which is what makes it stick. Luis Lopez got the same GTA 4 DLC treatment and walked away clean. Johnny didn't get that luxury. Luis Lopez. Nobody talks about Luis Lopez, and that's genuinely baffling, because The Ballad of Gay Tony is one of the most stylistically distinct entries in the entire franchise, and Luis is right at the center of it. Released in October 2009 as the second major DLC expansion to GTA 4, Ballad of Gay Tony follows Luis, a Dominican-American businessman managing nightclub operations for wealthy entrepreneur Gay Tony. And here's the thing that makes him genuinely funny as a GTA protagonist. At the start of the story, he's basically just doing his job. Running logistics, managing staff, handling operations. The man is legitimately employed. In a series full of criminals, hitmen, and unhinged revenge merchants, Luis Lopez is just a guy trying to keep the lights on at a nightclub, which is, not exactly the profile you expect from a GTA lead. But what actually separates Luis from almost every other protagonist in the franchise is his motivation. He's not chasing power, he's not running from a past, he stays in increasingly dangerous situations because he genuinely cares about the people around him. Loyalty as a primary driver is almost unheard of in this series, and yet somehow Luis never gets credit for it. He even appears in GTA 4's opening bank robbery sequence as a hostage, placing him directly inside the story's most iconic scene before his own game even explains how he got there. The franchise remembered him. Most players didn't. Fan discourse around Luis is basically non-existent compared to Nico or Tommy or CJ, which is a gap most GTA breakdown videos don't even acknowledge. This one does. He deserved better. Speaking of people who deserved more attention, let's talk about Huang Li. Huang Li is the protagonist almost nobody's heard of. Released March 2009 on the Nintendo DS, he's the lead of what was Rockstar's most direct attempt to portray Asian American criminal underworld culture with some degree of authenticity, and the game did it entirely through text, no voice acting, every single line of dialogue delivered through subtitles and speech bubbles, which on a handheld in 2009 was either a bold creative choice or a hardware limitation dressed up as one, probably both. Newly arrived from Hong Kong, Huang navigates Liberty City's Chinatown organized crime networks in a story that's genuinely more grounded and character-driven than people give it credit for. The game also featured full touchscreen mini-games, including safe-cracking and lock-picking, mechanics that made Chinatown Wars feel native to its hardware rather than a scaled-down version of a console game. Here's the thing, DS exclusivity and significantly less prominent marketing compared to the two GTA 4 DLC releases in the same year meant Chinatown Wars existed in near-total commercial obscurity despite being a critically acclaimed title. It reviewed well. People who played it loved it. Almost nobody played it. The documentation on Huang is notably thinner than for other protagonists. Critical analysis and fan discussion are genuinely sparse, which is itself part of the story. He's a fully realized protagonist who barely left a footprint. He exists in this weird, liminal space where he's technically part of the main series but functionally invisible to the broader fan base. But if you think handheld obscurity is brutal, wait until you see what happens when a protagonist gets everything Rockstar can throw at them and still ends up miserable. Michael DeSanta. Michael DeSanta has everything. The mansion, the money, the family. He starts GTA 5 living in a Rockford Hills estate with a swimming pool and a therapist he pays to listen to him complain about all of it. Here's the thing, that's the entire point. Michael is the American dream done, dusted, and found completely empty. Rockstar built a character who achieved every conventional marker of success and made him the most miserable person in the room. His money doesn't protect him, his family resents him, his legacy is a lie. The suburban comfort he bought with years of violent crime turned out to be a prison with better furniture. But what actually separates Michael from every GTA protagonist before him isn't the wealth or the malaise, it's the suicidal ideation. The therapy sessions where he genuinely unpacks it. Violence the franchise has always had in abundance. A protagonist sitting in a therapist's office and meaning it was entirely new territory, and the game's tone lands somewhere genuinely uncomfortable in a way that no shootout could. The fan split on him is real, real and probably permanent. Half the community considers him the richest, most textured character the franchise has ever produced, compelling precisely because his flaws aren't cool or exciting. The other half find him insufferable, a wealthy man who never stops moaning, especially next to someone like Nico who had actual tragedy to justify it. Both sides have a point. I don't know what to tell you. He can also be permanently killed if you pick the wrong ending, a mechanical consequence most protagonists never face. Franklin, though, is a completely different kind of story. Franklin Clinton. Franklin Clinton is the most hopeful character in GTA history, which in a franchise built on murder, betrayal, and institutional rot is a genuinely remarkable thing to be. He's 25 at the start of GTA 5, the youngest of the three protagonists, voiced by Sean Solo Fontano, and his story is the simplest and most grounded of the trio. Before the main plot kicks in, he's working as a repo man, taking cars from people who can't make payments, collecting a cut that barely covers rent. It's working class economic reality dressed up in a crime game, and it makes him feel more real than either Michael or Trevor before you've even gotten to know him. Here's the thing about Franklin that doesn't get said enough. He's the only GTA 5 protagonist who could actually leave. Smart stock plays, the right real estate moves, the vanilla unicorn portfolio developing correctly, and Franklin is theoretically set. Genuinely legitimate, he has an exit that Michael will never find and Trevor wouldn't take even if someone handed it to him on a clipboard, and then the game doesn't really let him use it. That's the real frustration. Franklin's screen time and story development were visibly sacrificed to give Michael and Trevor more room to breathe, and it shows. His arc, which is about escaping cycles of poverty and gang culture, is the most universal story in the game, and it's the one that gets the least space to resolve properly. His representation has generated real conversation too, praised for portraying a black protagonist navigating systemic disadvantage with authenticity, while others argue the story doesn't fully step outside familiar templates. Both takes are legitimate. Both would land harder if the game had given him more to work with. Franklin deserved another act. He didn't get one. Speaking of characters who were given too much to work with, Trevor Phillips is up next, and he is a completely different problem entirely. Trevor Phillips is either the most committed character study in GTA history or a walking argument that shock value and depth are not the same thing. Possibly both. The game never decides, and honestly, neither has anyone else. He's 49, Canadian-born, a former pilot, and the last of GTA 5's three protagonists to get a reveal trailer, which was entirely deliberate. Rockstar positioned him as the wild card after Michael and Franklin had already been introduced, and then his first scene in game does the rest of the work. Trevor wakes up in a desert trailer, and within 3 minutes, multiple people are dead. No build-up, no context. That's the introduction. That's all you need to know. Stephen Ogg's performance is the reason any of this lands. The physicality, the unpredictability, the way Trevor can pivot from genuine menace to something almost pitiable inside the same sentence. It's still discussed as one of the most committed voice performances in the medium, and that's not an accident or a fluke. Ogg clearly understood something about this character that the script alone doesn't fully explain. Here's the thing though, the game has a specific argument embedded in Trevor's arc, and it's not subtle. His violence and complete absence of stable human connection make him perpetually unstable, and ultimately expendable. He can be killed by either Michael or Franklin, depending on which ending you choose. One of GTA's three protagonists is designed to be disposable, and the game frames it as almost inevitable given who Trevor is. Not tragic, inevitable. That's a meaningful distinction. Then there's the sexual assault mission. It's still the single most controversial moment in GTA history. The debate about whether it represents genuine commentary on violence and power or just gratuitous shock tactics dressed up as commentary resurfaces every single time GTA 5 enters mainstream discussion, which, given the game's ongoing cultural presence, is basically constantly. That conversation has never been resolved, probably won't be. Fan reception to Trevor is the most polarized in the franchise, beloved and criticized simultaneously, often by the same people. Both readings are completely defensible, which is probably exactly what makes him unforgettable. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.